There are lots of people who love conspiracy theories. You know, there's conspiracy theories that say the Americans didn't land on the moon and that 9/11 was set up by the government, and conspiracy theories about MH370's disappearance. Currently, there are lots of conspiracy theories about COVID-19. Here's a few of the shorter ones. Some have said it's China attempted to preemptively inoculate their own population and then release the disease that would threaten the world. Some have said vaccinations have caused it, or that COVID-19 was created by the media to sell newspapers, or a husband and wife spy team stole the virus from Canada's National Microbiology Laboratory. And here's my favourite one. A feminist cult of witches created the virus to kill all the old white men. Psychologists tell us that people fall for conspiracy theories, particularly in times like this of uncertainty. We want answers and we want security and control. And so we seek out answers that fit our worldview and give us a sense of certainty. They're a source of comfort. Now, most of us, when we read conspiracy theories, have a fair degree of skepticism. It doesn't sound right. It's just too outrageous. The account of the resurrection in the first part of chapter 24 shows a high degree of skepticism by the disciples. The woman told the men what had happened, but the story sounded like nonsense. Now, Luke's a doctor, and the word he uses is a medical term for delirious ramblings. It was just too outrageous. The fact that it was a woman that told them probably wouldn't have helped. The guys probably thought the women were being emotional or hysterical, and in that time, women were not considered reliable witnesses. They couldn't give evidence in court. In fact, if this was a made-up story, you would never put this fact in. It's interesting because the disciples had seen 3 people raised from the dead by Jesus. But this was just too much. They were highly skeptical. Even when Peter saw the empty tomb, he was not totally convinced. In fact, Jesus has to appear to the disciples numerous times before they are convinced. He has to eat with them to show he's not a ghost. They have to touch him. Verse 41 of this chapter, he's standing right before them. And it says they're doubting. They are not easily convinced. It's actually worth remembering this when we're sharing our faith. The people who had Jesus standing before them were not convinced, then we shouldn't expect people 2,000 years later to easily believe that Jesus is alive. The finality of death is ground into us from a young age. People do not come back from the dead. So it's okay to be skeptical about that resurrection because it's an outrageous claim. And yet that is what the Christian faith totally stands or falls on. There's no debate that Jesus died. Secular historians do not debate this. In fact, they attest to it. But the resurrection is a very different story. It's worth noting that it took them quite a while to truly believe, but when they did, it transformed them into fearless evangelists. 10 of the 12 gave their lives for this fact that Jesus had risen from the dead. But once you know something is true, you can't undo it. You can't deny it. And no matter what other people say, you know what you've seen and experienced. And it transformed these men and women from fearful disciples to radically sold-out believers. This in itself is powerful witness to the truth of their accounts. We have to study the evidence and come to a conclusion, as many have done. Are these accounts credible? Do they stack up? If they do, then that's a life-altering fact. We can't remain the same. And of course, when we accept the resurrection, then we can personally encounter Jesus ourselves. And we've heard some testimonies before of how Jesus has changed us. The second thing that stands out in this passage is something that's easily missed. The angels say to the woman, these things must happen. And they tell them to remember what Jesus told them. And then it says they remembered what he'd said. What Luke is stressing is that this wasn't an accident. This was God's divine plan. God keeps his word. He's a promise keeper. The Old Testament prophesied about Jesus. Jesus said that he would die and rise again. What Luke is saying is that God can be trusted. He does what he says he will. Jesus is a fulfillment of the promises of God. The Bible often says things that appear unbelievable and outrageous, but God will fulfill his word. As we celebrate Jesus' resurrection day, it's important we remember this. God has promised those who believe that we will receive new bodies. That's an outrageous claim. God has promised he'll return to renew and restore this earth. Again, outrageous. God has promised there'll be a day when there'll be no more death or crying. Outrageous claim. God has promised that he'll bring justice to every injustice. Outrageous. But the resurrection of Jesus, Luke is saying, is God saying, this is my divine plan. And if Jesus is raised from the dead, then you can trust me to fulfill my plan. However unbelievable it might seem to us, God keeps his word. He is a promise keeper. He is a miracle worker. The resurrection is so important to us right now because around the world we're seeing people dying. We're seeing economies fall over. We're seeing fear and uncertainty. And we think, what is happening? But the resurrection streams to us. God is a promise keeper. He raised Christ from the dead. He has a divine plan. He's working out his purposes. Sure, we might not understand everything, but we don't need to seek out weird conspiracy theories. We can live with uncertainty because there's one thing we can know for certain, that God keeps his word. And Jesus' resurrection is proof of this. We can rest secure in this. We have absolute certainty that the promises of God will be fulfilled. So as we come to celebrating communion this morning, I want us to particularly focus on the future promise. At communion, we typically remember what Christ has done for us. We remember his death on the cross, that he died for us to bring us back into relationship with God. But communion also has a future element. We remember the resurrection, which is historical, but the historical event holds out a promise to us. Listen to some extracts from 1 Corinthians 15 from the Message. If there's no resurrection, there's no living Christ. And face it, if there's no resurrection for Christ, everything we've told you is smoke and mirrors, and everything we've staked your life on is smoke and mirrors. Not only that, but we would be guilty of telling you a string of barefaced lies about God. All these affidavits we pass on to you verifying that God raised up Christ, sheer fabrications if there's no resurrection. If corpses can't be raised, then Christ wasn't, because he was indeed dead. But if Christ weren't raised, then all you're doing is wandering about in the dark, as lost as ever. If all we get out of Christ is a little inspiration for a few short years, we're a pretty sorry lot. But the truth is that Christ has been raised up, the first in a long legacy of those who are going to leave the cemeteries. Why do you think I keep risking my neck in this dangerous work? It's resurrection, resurrection, always resurrection that undergirds what I do and say, the way I live. If there's no resurrection, we eat, we drink, and the next day we die. And that's all there is to it. But don't fool yourselves. Awaken to the holiness of life. No more playing fast and loose with resurrection facts. Ignorance of God is a luxury you can't afford in times like this. But let me tell you something wonderful, a mystery I'll probably never fully understand. We're not all going to die, but we're all going to be changed. Hear a blast to end all blasts from a trumpet. In that time you look up and blink your eyes, it's over. On signal from that trumpet from heaven, the dead will be up and out of their graves, beyond the reach of death, never to die again. At the same moment, in the same way, we'll all be changed. In the resurrection scheme of things, this has to happen. Everything perishable taken off the shelves and replaced by the imperishable. This mortal replaced by the immortal. Then the saying will come true, death swallowed by triumphant life. Who got the last word, O death? O death, who's afraid of you now? It was sin that made death so frightening, and the law code guilt that gave sin its leverage, its destructive power. But now in a single victorious stroke of life, all three, sin, guilt, death, are gone. The gift of our Master, Jesus Christ. Thank God. With all this going for us, my dear friends, stand your ground. Don't hold back. Throw yourselves into the work of the Master, confident that nothing you do for him is a waste of time or effort. Those words just seem so relevant to us in this season. That's the promise we remember as we celebrate communion this morning.